another episode of the Stadium Showdown, your in-depth look at the future home of the Cleveland Browns. I'm Jeff Slauson. This week, the city of Cleveland picks a developer for the lakefront. Yeah, that's a massive, massive deal. Plus, we have an in-depth look as to potentially how difficult it would actually be to close Burke Lakefront Airport. But first, let's go back to the choice of a developer for the lakefront here in the city of Cleveland. This is a massive deal. Essentially, for the last 100 years, there's been a debate about what to do with the lakefront. Now, for the longest time, that debate included Cleveland Browns Stadium. That is no longer the case. Brown Stadium will be demoed in 2029, so of course that means something's got to go there, and now we have an idea as to who's going to be making those decisions. Here's 19's Brittany Weir.
Yes, this is a major step forward. We learned today that the Geronimo Development Company will lead the start of the makeover right here at the lakefront. So in just a couple of years, your family will be able to dine, shop, and even stay right on the shores of Lake Erie. The plans include housing, hotels, restaurants, and shops. Scott Skinner, the president of North Coast Waterfront Development Corporation, tells us they are also working to include parks and waterfront walkways. Lastly, there will be an indoor-outdoor music venue with approximately 10,000 seats.
So these are not finalized, these are not 100% secure, but these are the uses that we are going to work towards achieving on our downtown lakefront. We want to see people on our lakefront, and you know, from what we've heard in community feedback, people do want to live near the water and in the downtown.
It is important to note the construction for this major project, it can't begin until this Brown Stadium here is demolished. That is set to happen in 2029, but we do know the renderings for this major development should be available to the public by next summer. In Cleveland, Brittany Weir, 19 News.
And again, 2029, the absolute earliest that we would see a demolishing of the Brown Stadium, and then ultimately construction. So this is a 10, 20, 30-year project, really not going to be seen for quite some time, but still showing progress that it exists. All right, now we take our attention to Burke Lakefront Airport. You have heard from the Haslams. You've heard from Mayor Justin Bibb. You have heard from Congresswoman Shontel Brown. Burke Lakefront Airport is something that many want to go away, but we haven't heard from those that believe it should stay. And not only that, but the fact that it's not necessarily as cut and dry as closing a normal store as it is closing an airport. So I had an interview earlier this week with an expert on exactly why it's not so simple just to close Burke and potentially what he sees as the way to go forward. We've not heard a lot of people defend Burke and defend the reason why Burke should still exist. We've all known that Burke has seen a decline in the amount of usage that it has had. I mean, in fairness, so has Hopkins. It's just a more steady decline. The land itself is one that has been eyed from the federal to the state level. Give us the reason why, at least according to your opinion, it's not necessarily as cut and dry as, oh, get rid of it and a lot of things are going to get a lot better.
Yeah, so let me start with you about the decline in specific operations at Burke Lakefront. So Burke is designated as a reliever airport for Cleveland Hopkins, meaning a lot of the private aircraft, slower aircraft outside the commercial airlines go to Burke Lakefront Airport. So it's designed to see specific uses, which are smaller aircraft, slower aircraft, and some corporate aircraft mixed in. One of the reasons for the decline is there was a company back in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, called AirNet. And AirNet was a regional cargo carrier. And they actually, their bread and butter were flying the canceled checks around at night, and maybe some other medical supplies and things like that. But as the digital age advanced and online banking became more prevalent, the need for the actual paper copy canceled checks went away. And AirNet, for all intents and purposes, went away nearly overnight. I believe in 2008 was kind of that time frame. So not just Burke Lakefront saw a decline in operations, but a lot of airports across the country saw a decline in these operations. But the operations at Burke currently, I would say on average is 50,000 per year in that range, which is right in line with other airports of that size. Cincinnati Lunken Airport is kind of an outlier. It's a very heavily corporate airport. It's the reliever for CBG, Cincinnati Northern Kentucky. It sees around 120,000 operations per year, but there are 5 flight schools at Cincinnati Lunken Airport that contribute a lot to those operations. If you would peel back the flight school operations and things and that nature, even Cincinnati Lunken is going to be probably in the 60,000 range, so not far off from what Burke Lakefront is. So for the mayor and the administration to say it's not being used, he just doesn't put it in context, and it's just a false statement to be putting out there that it's an underutilized airport.
The numbers, at least the data that we had seen from a previous report from the city, are that Burke provides about $76 million a year to the area, to the county. If it were to be replaced by some sort of redevelopment mixed-use space, it could be worth up to $92 million a year. I feel like the numbers aren't necessarily as simple as that, because obviously it's going to take quite a bit of effort to get to that point. What is the effectiveness of Burke itself then, staying where it is? And I know that you can speak, at least as far as like the legislative side on this. I mean, it does not seem like it is just as cut and dry as saying we're going to be done with Burke and something will show up immediately.
Yeah, and $76 million is a hefty number. ODOT, Ohio Department of Transportation, is actually going through a state aviation system plan that's supposed to be released later this year, late spring, early summer is the timeline, and we will have really good updated numbers, not just for Burke, but all of the airports in the state's system. So we're really interested to get our hands on that. AOPA is a member of the advisory committee for that system planning. But yeah, to put it in context, you can't just turn the light switch off at Burke and expect all that traffic just to go to Cuyahoga County or Hopkins, because when you've seen one airport, this is in the airport world, this is a saying: when you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport, meaning that every airport's unique and who they cater to, who they service, and what those needs are. At Burke Lakefront, it's a heavily transient airport, meaning there's not a lot of based aircraft. But don't let that fool you. Not having many based aircraft, we're talking maybe 15 to 20 airplanes based there permanently. To have that number of operations, that's a heavily used airport, with only having so many aircraft based there. But to actually close an airport and take those operations elsewhere, Cuyahoga County is operating probably in the 50 to 60,000 range. So if you expect to double the amount of operations at Cuyahoga County without any infrastructure upgrades or any airspace redesign, you're kidding yourself, because to do an airspace redesign would require the FAA to do very heavy environmental impact analysis. It would also impact Cuyahoga County instrument approaches, also other transient air routes in the Cleveland area. Look at going into Detroit, even Detroit or Akron, even into Columbus. Airspace is very intricate, and it's designed for very specific purposes. But just the influx of putting other airplanes on an airport physically would require changes in the layout and the design of an airport. And will the businesses at that airport be able to support an influx of traffic like that without heavy investment? And if Burke were to close, one thing AOPA would definitely ask is who's going to pay for all of this, right? You're talking about $76 million per year coming to the city. And let's not talk about whether Burke is making money or not. An airport, any airport, is a utility. It's there for the service of the community and the city and the region. So making money is kind of a moot point. It's nice if airports can break even or be as self-sustaining as they possibly can, but not a lot of airports make money, to be honest. But to pay for all that infrastructure upgrades, whether it be runway improvements or the airspace redesigns or these environmental impact studies, and all the other studies that would come into building on another airport, we don't think the FAA should pay for that out of the Airways and Airspace Trust Fund. The city of Cleveland should have some skin in the game if they want to close Burke and replace it elsewhere. And that would be a pretty high bar. And again, we don't know what that would look like, because the city, to our knowledge, has not investigated what it would take to move all those operations elsewhere.
And that interview is with Kyle Lewis with the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. Coming up after the break, we have part 2 of the interview, plus even more updates from Brook Park. That after a short break. Welcome back. So now that we know a developer for downtown, what happens to Burke Lakefront Airport? Here's part 2 of my interview.
Burke were somewhere else, a mile inland or farther to the east or whatever, no, I don't think we'd be having this conversation. But because it is on the lakeshore and where it's at in relation to the city, it does make it prime real estate, so to speak. But the airport's there for a reason. It's very, very near, just a couple blocks, I believe, from the Cleveland Clinic. There's a lot of medevac operations coming in and out of that airport, not just from based users, but from outside users across the country coming to Burke Lakefront for those very specific uses with the Cleveland Clinic. Organ transplant flights, flying in teams of doctors to perform these surgeries, patients from international patients coming to the Cleveland Clinic. And when you're talking about the medical side of things, time is of the essence always. And to have an airport that close is very unique. I can't think of another airport in that situation that serves, you talk about the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. They operate an airport. I won't say operate an airport. They're very heavily involved at the airport in Rochester, Minnesota for the Mayo Clinic. And they're very supportive of that airport. In fact, the airport in Rochester is managed by the Rochester Airport Company, which is a subdivision of the Mayo Clinic. So they're very heavily involved in that airport, and it's being invested in heavily in Rochester. So I think Burke lacks investment. I'll be the first to say it. It's been ignored, from an infrastructure standpoint for a long time. They've taken federal grant dollars for necessary improvements that the FAA is requiring them to do. But investing on that forward-facing side to the city has been lacking. If you just drive around the property, yes, you can see there's some overgrowth on the fences, and maybe it doesn't look as pretty as what it could be. But that's where I think we could find common ground with the administration is, yes, 450 acres is a lot. Does the airport need all 450 acres to operate? I don't want to make that call, but I think it's worth looking at. Are there other compatible uses around the property that can make the airport even better and make it a win-win-win situation, not just for the administration, because everybody wants the city to do well, but we also want the airport to be viable, and the public, make it usable space for the public. And that's going to take some investment from all three of those corners.
Yeah, you're probably the first person that has vocally said that Burke needs investment and more opportunity than less, because, as I said, there's just not a lot of knowledge as to what to do with it. Congresswoman
Right.
Chantel Brown sending out a survey asking people to give their opinions on whether or not they want it to close, what they want to do with it, things like that, and just honestly, like looking at that survey, it's kind of pointed in the way that the question is asked too.
Yeah, I did see that survey. We had one of our members send me the survey, and it's kind of a yes or no question, right? Do you think Burke should remain open? Well, I mean, if you're just putting that at face value, I think you're going to get very skewed results. There's a lot of context and information that needs to be shared about Burke Lakefront before a decision is made. And I feel like the administration, they have not reached out to the aeronautical users of that facility. They've been left out of this conversation entirely. In fact, AOPA sent a letter to the mayor in 2022 when he announced his plan to pursue closing Burke Lakefront, and we never had a response. And we haven't had a response since the Lakefront Airport Preservation Partnership sent a letter just a few weeks ago. Still no communication from the mayor's office. We have had feedback and actually some meeting invites with Senator Moreno and Senator Houston. We're working on scheduling those. I think they want to learn more about the situation overall because there are a lot of nuances with this and a lot of questions that need to be answered, and maybe some other questions that need to be asked that haven't yet. That's sometimes the more important thing, is what else is out there that we can take a look at.
Kyle, you answered all of my questions here. Is there anything we didn't touch on that we should have?
I just think airports in the United States, it's a very unique system that we have. And it's not every day an airport closes, especially congressionally. That's very, very rare. And it would set a bad precedent to go down this path, because there's a lot of other federally obligated, federally funded airports where the local administration may not be favorable to the airport, or they just don't understand. And they want to take the same path as Cleveland and just, willy-nilly close the airport because it's an ugly piece of property and they don't understand it. So my ask is, we just want the mayor to come and talk to us, right? We want to start a conversation. We'd like to educate his administration on what happens at Burke. And one thing we didn't talk about is what's underneath the property, which is a toxic waste site. Unfortunately, back in 1930s, 1940s, a lot of the toxic material from the Cuyahoga River was dumped on that site, and an airport built over top of it because there's not much other use you can have in a situation like that. And nobody's really talking about that in detail. And I have not heard any solid numbers of what it would take to remediate that property, even the green space, right? Just to something to build on. Just from some fringe conversations I've had with engineers familiar with the property, would potentially be in the billions with a B of dollars to remediate that property. So $76 million a year in revenue sounds pretty good at that point. But yeah, we'd like to have a conversation with the mayor. So come and talk to us, give us a call. He's got our number.
Yeah, to go along with your point there, the Cleveland Browns claimed that they had looked at Burke as a potential option to move their site, and they had said it was hundreds of millions of dollars for remediating. They didn't get. I'm going to guess that obviously could get to $1 billion, but that was their easy estimate.
So yeah, hundreds of millions, billions. We just don't know because I don't think.
Or hundreds of millions, excuse me, hundreds of millions.
Yeah, hundreds of millions. I just don't think there's ever been a real in-depth study of what it would take to remediate that, because the cost is so high. I'm not sure it's worth it.
We now take our attention to Brook Park, where Brittany Weir has the latest on traffic improvement announcements that are going to be going in to potentially help deal with airport traffic and, of course, new Browns Stadium traffic.
The city of Brook Park and Osborne Engineering presented a multi-phase plan that would reconfigure ramps, widen local roads, and build new pedestrian walkways around the Browns' new stadium.
In general, we're finding that there's very minimal congestion caused by the project. We'll be resubmitting certified traffic and the interchange modification study to ODOT very soon.
These improvements are estimated to cost about $82 million. Mayor Edward Orcutt and representatives from Osborne Engineering says for the first phase, there are a total of 6 major projects. Once completed, they will have a small impact on your commute to the airport and to the hospital.
The maximum we find out from our list of all the neighborhoods, maybe the maximum is 2 to 3 minutes, 1 or 2 locations. Apart from that, the weighted average is about 50 meters.
The mayor also shared they plan on installing anywhere from 200 to 300 cameras at different intersections around the Browns' new dome. Those cameras will be monitored at a control center during game days.
How can this be something that we can sustain long term? So if we can do that with automation and be able to control the flow of traffic better with cameras rather than bodies, we think that we'll have a more efficient traffic flow in and around the stadium.
And for where to park on game day, Mayor Orcutt says in addition to the spaces at the new facility, the city has identified an additional 12,000 off-site parking spots at local businesses around the stadium.
And some companies have committed. We do have a list of them. Some of them are still waiting to hear from their boards to see if they'll be able to do that.
Construction on the traffic projects has been tentatively scheduled for 2027 through 2029 if all the funding is secured. But planners say final designs and agreements on parking and shuttles must come first. In Brook Park, Brittany Weir, 19 News.
And coming up after the break, we have the latest with Dave Yost, the Attorney General here in the state of Ohio, how he feels about the current lawsuits related to the Cleveland Browns. That after a short break. Attorney General Dave Yost spoke with our Dan DeRose about exactly how he feels with some of the lawsuits pertaining to the Cleveland Browns move. Here they are.
We're happy to be joined by Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost for this year-end conversation. Attorney General, we'd like to start with a topic that has dominated our headlines the entire year. We're talking about the Cleveland Browns trying to move to Brook Park, and that stadium deal. Seems the last hurdle is a lawsuit that has been brought by a man who used to hold your position, Mark Dan, saying that the use of unclaimed funds is unconstitutional, and he's prepared to fight this. He's already filed an appeal. Is he correct?
I don't think so. And this is coming from somebody who did not like this move by the legislature. I said so at the time. But just because I didn't think it's wise doesn't mean that it's unconstitutional. Those two things are not synonymous. The bottom line is the state of Ohio is within its rights to do the program that they are executing. Mark Dan is appealing because he couldn't even get a temporary restraining order on the record that he has. And I'm confident the state's going to prevail and the project is going to go forward.
All right, Dan, thank you so much. And that is it for our last episode of 2025 in the Stadium Showdown. I want to thank everybody for watching. Been really great reception, and we are so appreciative of everybody reaching out regarding the show. We, of course, will be back in 2026. Going to take a couple weeks off as we have to deal with some different shows and things like that. But want to thank everybody so much for watching over the last few months. And we will see you, of course, for our latest episode in 2026. Of course, if you missed any of our content for the last year, go ahead and scan the QR code on your screen right now. That'll give you the latest information. Thank you so much for watching once again. We will see everybody coming up in 2026. Have a fantastic holiday, fantastic new year. For now, I'm Jeff Slauson with 19 News. See everybody in a few weeks. Welcome back. Attorney General